Today we're going to be talking about solarizing raised garden beds. So why are we out here in a vastly empty raised garden bed? Well, that's a good question. See, we have a bit of a problem, and that problem is root knot nematodes. Let me show you. Okay, so we've moved over to a different section of the raised garden bed that I haven't pulled all the plants yet. And you can see this basil, I let it go to seed. It's not looking very happy, but let's inspect what's going on underneath the ground. All right, so for the size of this basil plant, I should have a much larger root development on this plant. And as you can see, it has been stunted greatly. Now, I can see some very small nodules, maybe you can see them here, but the other plants that I pulled were just filled, riddled with nodules on the roots from the attacks from the root knot nematodes. So not only do they create those nodules, but they stunt and limit the root growth, which is really going to weaken your plant to allow other pests to destroy your crop. And that's what happened pretty much in our entire raised garden bed this year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to solarize it. So we're back over to the area that I've already cleared out, and I'm going to continue to prep this bed so that way I can solarize it. Solarizing is a technique where you lay plastic flush against the soil so that way you can heat the soil, thus killing a multitude of problems that may occur in your soil. Root knot nematode is obviously our target #1, but it should also kill off any dormant weed seeds that may be lying on our surface here for our raised garden beds. So that's good as well. At this point, now that I've removed the plants, I want to remove our irrigation system. So we have drip lines laid out here, and I have a layer of leaf mulch on top of that. So I'm just gonna have to get down and dirty and dig around in there and find all my irrigation lines. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I found this when I was taking out the irrigation, and this gives you a better look at what I'm talking about with the root knot nematode damage. Do you see all these bumps that are on the roots, like right here, this nodule, and on the base of the stem itself? That is the nodules that I'm talking about with root knot nematode damage. It's one of the easiest ways to determine if that's the pest that's bothering you. So I found and removed all my irrigation, my drip line, and in that process, I realized that there's still a lot of roots in here, and I want to remove all of that plant material because that is an ideal location for the root knot nematodes to hide out. So I want to remove all that food source for them and make sure that this is tilled well. Just pretend like you're prepping it for a new planting season. That's how thorough you want to be with prepping your plot before laying down your plastic for solarization. Okay, so I've gone ahead and tilled this section of the raised garden bed, and I made sure that I went at least 6 inches deep. This is my target area because I know the solarization process is going to penetrate 6 inches deep. So that's something crucial that you want to keep in mind when prepping your area and deciding what you're going to plant after this process is done. As you can see, I have some really lovely soil here. It's dark, it's rich, it's full of organic matter. So if I didn't have those pesky root knot nematodes, I should have had a bumper crop this year. So frustrating. So one of the things that I did while my plants were still in here is I actually broke down out of frustration and I treated this area with a nematicide to try to kill off the root knot nematodes. Now, I knew the nematicide was also going to kill off the beneficial nematodes, but I thought it was worth the gamble. Well, guess what? I temporarily killed off the root knot nematodes, not permanently, but I did kill off the beneficial nematodes, which then caused a surplus of slugs to invade my raised garden bed because beneficial nematodes keep the slug population in check. It's all a balance with gardening, so you really need to weigh the pros and cons before you make that decision. I had never had a problem with slugs before, so I thought I was hedging my bets. Boy, was I wrong. All right, so at this point, I need to smooth this area out so it's nice and flat. This is going to guarantee that I have as much surface area connection between the top layer of soil and my plastic sheeting. So let's go ahead and do that now. So you can use a hoe, like so. You can use an iron rake. I like to use both the tonged edge because that is going to get and collect any of those little root bits that I missed with my hand digging, so I can remove those. And then I can flip it to its flat edge and use that similar to the hoe to make a nice straight area. If you don't have either of those tools, but you do have an extra piece of discarded lumber, say a 2x4, my dad uses that all the time for leveling and it works just as fine as any store-bought tool. Another thing you want to keep in mind when leveling your soil is you don't want to compact the soil. You don't want to press it down and make it really condensed, because that would take away the whole point of having a raised garden bed in the first place. You want your soil to be nice and loose, so that way when you do plant, there's plenty of room for your root growth to occur. So at this stage, I'm satisfied with my tilling, I'm satisfied with my leveling, and so now I need to water this thoroughly. That may seem a little counterintuitive, but the moisture in the soil before you lay the plastic down is really going to help that heat penetrate your soil. So I'm looking to have this soak at least 12 inches deep. We've had a lot of rain recently, so I basically just gave it a good soak. I'm pretty sure this is well saturated already. So now it's time for me to lay down my plastic. When selecting your plastic, you want to look for something that's not only clear, but at least 2 millimeters thick. It's also a good idea, if you can find it, to find something that's UV protective, because the idea is to have sun directly hit this so that way it heats the soil. The UV protection on your plastic is going to let it last longer and not degrade so quickly. Another thing to keep in mind when you're selecting your plastic is the dimensions of the area you intend to cover. If you can find something that's a little bit wider than the depth of your bed, and obviously long enough to cover the whole span, then that is ideal. You can always cut and adjust your plastic, so err on the larger side rather than the smaller side. At this point, I have my plastic laid out in the area that I've prepped, and I want to take a spade and kind of dig a trench along the very edge. I want to make sure that I can tuck the plastic down into the soil so that way it is nice and flush against my soil surface. So it's kind of like you're making a bed. You want to make sure you tuck those edges down tight and smooth out the plastic so it's making full contact with the top layer of your soil. You're going to let this sit in direct sunlight for 4 to 6 weeks. It's really important that the sun has direct contact with this because you're really wanting to heat this. If you are in a shaded area, this technique really isn't going to work for you. So as you can tell here, the sun is starting to creep up. We tried to film this early in the morning so that we'd have good shade. But as soon as the sun passes my fence here, this is going to be in full sun and it's going to be good to go. So once your 4 to 6 weeks is up, carefully remove the plastic and you should be ready to plant. I'm actually going to go an extra step beyond that, and I'm going to plant a cover crop after I'm done solarization. I've chosen a cover crop that is specific to being resistant to root knot nematodes. That way I can reinvigorate my soil without feeding any root knot nematodes that may still be existing. I'll put a link to that cover crop in the description below. So some things to think about besides that is you want to make sure when you're planting your new plants not to dig too deep. Remember, you've only treated the top 6 inches of your soil. Also, it's a good idea to select the plants that you're going to plant in here based on that knowledge that you had a previous root knot nematode infection. So if you find plants or seed packets that are labeled VFN, those are going to be resistant to the type of pests that you were dealing with before. That way, you won't be reintroducing those pests back into your garden after you've worked so hard to get rid of them. I hope you found this helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.